All right, so I am Andrey Gogolev, and this is Kostya
Khanin.
And today we will interview Yakov Pesin. We are on campus of Penn State University in Mathematics Department building.
In Yasha's office.
And today is, for the record, today is November 5th, 2022. Kostya, do you want to start?
Well, this is a conference now, which is dedicated to 75th birthday of Yasha and Misha Brin. And we use this opportunity to have this interview. Now, all three people present here are Russian speakers, so we could have done it in Russian, but we decided to have it in English because we thought that it would be of interest for wider mathematical community, or it might be of interest, so that's what we hope. So anyway, the aim is to ask some questions to Yasha and to get as much as possible from his experience and from his life and from what advice he can do and what are his views on this and that. So let's see how it goes. So let us start.
And let me thank you.
Oh. At the end, you can think it's yeah, that's better. Yes. So, Yasha, we wanted to start from the very beginning. I mean, in your family, was it academic-oriented family, or you were the first person who went to academia, and how it came around that you become a mathematician?
I'm the first and the only. My family, my father was a simple worker at some factory in Russia. My mother had a very good education by standards of the time. She graduated from what is called Baumansky Institute, which was a pretty good institute for engineering school. And then she worked through her entire life at the same institute where my father worked as an engineer. That's the highest level of, you can say, scientific or whatever.
You have brothers and siblings?
I don't.
I'm
the only one.
So your family is from Moscow. Everyone is.
My mother and father were born in Belarus. Both of them had big families. My father had 11 brothers and sisters. My mother had 6. But as far as I know, neither family nor my cousins also were scientists. So I'm the only one.
But you were born in Moscow, as far as
I was born in Moscow, so they moved there after the war.
So at that time, when you were at high school, Moscow already had maybe a couple, maybe more of mathematical schools. Did you go to any of mathematical schools?
It was a little different. When I was like 2 or 3 years old, my family moved to the suburb of Moscow. And that place, there was no special mathematical school. There were only 2 schools for the entire town. And I attended one of them, which was viewed as a good school. I had a very nice math teacher as well as physics teacher. But nothing special, nothing out of ordinary.
So at what age you decided that you want to be a mathematician? And
I like mathematics from early on. But it was like, there was nothing that I would dream of becoming a mathematician. I just liked the subject. And that was it. I was good in many other subjects, so it wasn't immediately clear which one I would end up with. It changed in 1963 when I started my 10th grade at high school. At this time, the government decided that the high school should be extended for 1 year. So I should I would have studied 10th and 11th grades to graduate the school. So in the 10th grade, Kolmogorov organized special schools, physical mathematical school, internat boarded schools. And one day in September, my math teacher told me that she recommends me to take an exam to this school. It was me and my friend, one of my friends. And there was a leeway, very, very good leeway. She said, I have we have 2 days not to go to school to prepare for exam. So we certainly took the bait. And then we went to the exam. It was a remarkable situation. There was a huge number of students. Almost everyone came with parents. And my parents couldn't come as well as my friend parents.
Because most of them were coming not from Moscow region area.
Yes.
So they traveled from far
It was all for Moscow region. It was that exam only happened to people in Moscow regions. And later on I learned that there was about 400 students taking this exam. It was a written exam in math. One part is geometry, another part is algebra. And then only 15 students were selected for the second exam, which was oral exam in math and oral exam in physics. So we were selected, both of us, and we passed the oral exam. Only 8 people passed the oral exam, and we were accepted to this school. And that was a huge change in my entire life and career and everything. So then I studied for almost 3 years at this school.
It's interesting. I know you for so long time. I didn't know that you went to 18th Gogolev.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And then you started to participate in the Olympiads, I guess, because before that.
I took once a Moscow Olympiad. I got some prize, certainly not the highest one. I was not such a good Olympian to begin with. I didn't have much interest in that, in a sense. I like the problems, but I didn't like to go and within a certain time trying to show myself as a brilliant mathematician. I was not like this.
The competitors of these Olympiads were not what you were looking for.
No.
So after internat, you were accepted to Moscow State University, I guess, to Mikhmat.
Yes.
So was it 64? Which year?
65.
65. Because you studied for 11 years in high school, right?
Yes.
Okay. And this was a very good period for Mikhmat.
Fantastic period.
Exciting period. So can you tell us something about Mikhmat of this time?
I would say, in a sense, I mean, at the time, I just lived my life within the university. The matter is that when I was at the internat, it was a boarding school. So I lived like in the dormitory. In a big room, 10 beds in one room. So it was, but we are 10 years, 10 grades. I mean, you don't care about many things. Then when so it was easy for me to get into Moscow school, Moscow University, another dormitory, just a different. Instead of 10, it was just 4. So it was improvement. So from everyday life, it was easy. It didn't take much. Mathematically, it was an absolutely outstanding period because, I mean, first of all, the lectures that the professors who taught us were the best names. Arnold taught differential equation. Manin taught what was called highest algebra at the time. Schiller was teaching calculus. Rashevsky was teaching geometry. Come on, you can't find a better team to get educated. Many seminars. I started my first seminar which was Arnold. I'm sorry, Alexeyev and Sinai seminar.
So when did you start it? On
the second
year.
Second year at school.
Was it recommended by someone, or was it just?
I can't say for sure why I chose this seminar. Certainly, there was some kind of a discussion between students which seminar to attend. And Sinai seminar was on the list, maybe not on the top of the list at the time. Arnold was very popular. However, for whatever reason, I decided that I'd try. I actually tried few, so it may not be my first choice. I don't remember the details of that.
You don't remember what else did you try?
I tried seminar. The matter is that I was only, at the time, I was very much interested in functional analysis. So I don't remember who taught functional analysis, but I took a seminar on functional analysis. I also was interested in physics, and I took a seminar on relativity theory.
But the seminar was not something you sign up for, right? You just go.
You just come in.
Right.
You just
Very
come in.
informal.
Right.
Yes, it was easy. I mean,
Anyone can come and
yes, absolutely. And there was no prerequisites or any particular requirements.
you can just come from a street and join.
Yes, absolutely. And later on, when I was on my third grade, I changed the room in the dormitory where I stayed in, and my roommate was Kerim Volkovsky, son of a famous mathematician and friend of Sinai. And under his influence, I decided to stay in Sinai and actually chosen Sinai as to be my undergraduate student advisor.
I know the paper Volkovsky about ergodicity of ideal gas.
Yes,
It's
yes,
simple.
yes.
little paper.
yeah. So,
Yeah, so it was again improvement from 4 people in dormitory to 2 people in the room, right?
yes,
Yes.
so it's not bad.
So basically, as everybody else, you started to do research project at the year 3, probably.
Yes.
And what was your first research project on?
That's actually pretty interesting. When I came to Sinai, I asked him to be his student. He agreed. And the project he gave me was to compute the entropy of total automorphism.
There we go.
Yes, which was kind of, he knew already that would be my interest at the time.
And, interesting.
Yes. And then he left. I guess he was on a trip somewhere at the time.
To Poland,
Maybe, I don't remember. And he said, when he come back, I have to show him the proof, the result and the proof. He didn't even tell me what the answer should be. And I managed to do that. So
I was student of Sinai much later, and he asked, before agreeing to take us as his students, undergraduate students, he asked us to pass exam on the Yerevan book on ergodic theory. Did it exist already at that time?
No.
No, it was
so
not.
I was lucky. It came a little later.
Yeah. All right. And so at that time, you were participating basically in one big seminar, Sinai Alexeyev seminar, or Alexeyev Sinai seminar.
I continued to take physics seminar, so I participated in 2.
Who was running the physics one?
Some professor from physics department, but I took maybe 1 semester of relativity theory, but then I switched to quantum mechanics. So that's the 2 outside of the standard physics courses, the 2 other courses that I took.
It's slightly unusual because most mathematicians were not taking physics seminar, but it's interesting that you were taking it.
I just like it.
Yeah.
There was no other motivation for
I
that.
guess you had very good physics teacher at school. Well, that is
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So then you graduated from Moscow State 5 years later.
Yes, in
which was
1970.
1970, which was not already as great year as when you started. And you were admitted to the to aspirantura?
No.
You were not,
No.
of course not.
No, I had a recommendation. I had a conversation with Sinai, telling him that I would like to be considered for aspirantura. He agreed to write a letter. I was about to graduate, and was clear that I would graduate with what is called red diploma, meaning that with flyers.
Yeah.
I
With
had
honors.
all the great scores, and I had another paper. I mean, besides this first problem that he gave me, the actual problem, like my kind of undergraduate diploma, was in CAM theory. And I solved he gave me a problem which I actually solved. And he was pretty happy, and I gave talk about that on Kolmogorov seminar. So it was considered kind of a good result. And so he agreed to write a letter of recommendation and submit it to scientific council. I had a friend of mine who was a member of Komsomol committee of of the department, and he told me that they received papers to consider me, along with other people, of course, for graduate school. And they said yes. And soon after that, he told me I went for, let's say, распределение, meaning like an assignment committee. And there I came being kind of assured that I will be allowed to go to graduate school, but I was told that no allowance came. They don't know anything. And I was assigned to go to some dark institute, one of those PO institutes, where I would probably will die. So my math will die completely. And I said, no, I know that I was recommended, etc., that because it was more or less first year when they started doing things like that. They were, and I mentioned Kolmogorov. I said Kolmogorov told me they weren't sure if I was bluffing or not. I wasn't, but they didn't know. So they said, okay, come in a week and we will decide. I came in a week and they said, no, you are not going to graduate school. But they assigned me to a better place, which was Institute of Optical Physical Measurements, which was kind of a reasonable research institute located in Moscow, etc., etc.
I see. Yes, this thing happened to many people, as we know, and we know the reasons for that. Was it the first time you were personally feeling the effect of the policy, official policy at the time of not allowing Jewish young guys to get in the graduate school and to Moscow State University?
No. I tell you a somewhat funny story. When I was to graduate internat, the Kolmogorov school, we had to take final exams, of course, as everybody at school, and one of them was in algebra. When I came to take the exam, it was an oral exam because it was not a standard school exam. So they just did it in an oral form.
So this is final year of the school.
Final year at the school, yeah. It's for the entire school.
State examination.
Yes. And I took a ticket, was prepared. There was a question and a problem, and I did it. And the committee consisted of 2 our school teachers, and there was someone else. And I never seen the guy. The guy came to me and asked me if I'm ready. I said, yes, I'm ready. So he said, okay, go and answer. I answered the question, no questions from the committee. I solved the problem, no question from the committee. This guy gave me another problem to solve, which I did. No question during my solution. And he said, you can go. I left, I felt like I did everything, no question. So there was another student in the school, whom this guy also examined. And when the exam was over, our teacher came out and said that me and this guy failed. We were in shock, saying, how? we answered. He said, this guy was a representative of Steklov Institute who came to observe how this internet was doing. And he took 2 of you for examination. And he decided that you didn't answer correctly and failed. I said, I just want to point out that in the entire school there were 2 Jewish students. That was the 2 people. And the funny part of the story, that was a tragic part of the story, a dramatic part of the story. The funny part was that we didn't know what to say, because that would mean ruin completely our any chances to go to any place, of course. But our teacher said, don't worry, we allow you to repeat the exam. Please come tomorrow.
And you got 5.
It was even more fun than that. Even better, I should say. We were studying the entire night, I should say, repeating what we already knew, but who knows. And we came into the room. There were the same 2 teachers sitting. We came, we were supposed to take tickets. There was no ticket. The guy said, did you prepare for the exam?
But no Stiklov person.
No Stiklov person. Did you prepare for the exam? He said, yes. Okay, you got A. That was it.
So it was clear to everybody
Absolutely
what was happening.
Absolutely.
And you also knew the reason.
Absolutely.
So already at that time you were aware of what's going on.
Oh, I was aware from my childhood who I am.
Okay.
So
that was part of
not
it.
just one time I was told who I am.
Let me ask you,
By my peers.
so it was many people more or less of your age, like Leonid Bunimovich and other, who was studying more or less the same time, right? You
Yes.
probably was the same years, Leonid Bunimovich.
Leonia was a year earlier.
So was it a big group you discussed between yourself? I mean, did you interact much with people in this group? Like younger people, like Kashevets, like Sukhov, like Bunimovich. Like
Everybody knew what was going on, but I do not recall any serious discussion.
No, I mean not the Semitic topic. I mean just mathematically. Did you interact with?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's for sure. That's for sure.
So it was a kind of group.
Yeah, the matter is that the way it was progressing is that I started working under Sinai. I attended Alexeyev Sinai seminar. It was a fantastic seminar by all means. Very, I should say, democratic. You can sit and you can ask questions, whatever questions you want at any time. I mean, if it's
normal
Moscow seminar, absolutely. And it lasted long and nobody would say, oh, 1 hour passed. There was no thinking of this time. I did not talk much with the celebrities, unfortunately, at the time, but I did talk to Gurevich, to Kornfeld, to Bunimovich, more or less all the participants close to my age, I would say. And then in 68, I believe it was in fall of 68, Sinai, Katok just graduated, got his PhD, and he asked permission to teach a course. And Sinai told, Sinai was involved, Katok was Sinai's student, so he recommended him to teach a course. And at this time, I met special course. And at this time, I met Misha Brin, Kirim, Misha Brin, and I were 3 students, 3 friends, and we went to took this course. And from that moment on, we started to be kind of interacting with Katok.
And at what stage you started to participate in the loss of seminar?
When I graduated, I was assigned to work, and it was, I wanted to do math. When I was in internet, I believe that was a crucial part of my life. I mean, you get some kind of I would even say love to the profession that was not so easy to erase. I would say devotion to it, interest in doing that. So to me, even when I was assigned to work at some obscure place, it was not a question whether I should switch mathematics to whatever this institute was doing. And that was a research institute. There were some topics that I could follow and pick up, and my life in terms of getting PhD, etc., might be even easier, but it was not even a question to consider at that time. So by all means, I wanted to continue to do math. And when I talked to Tony, at this time, before we graduated, somewhere in 70, Katok and Anosov organized a seminar. So since we've been involved with Katok for almost 2 years before, we naturally started to attend that seminar. We still, from time to time, would go to Sinai seminars. So it's not that we abandoned one in favor of another, not at all, but it was difficult to attend both of them. So we had to choose, and we chose Anosov Katok.
Was it also at Moscow State or it was in Stiklovka?
I believe it started in Stiklovka right away in the 70s. Maybe there was short period when it was in Moscow University, but when we started really kind of attending it, it was at Stiklovka.
So I wanted to ask you, since you were one of the few people, maybe not few, but like probably Stepin also was coming to both seminars and Katok and you, I don't remember Anosov coming often to Sinai seminar, I would say, but maybe very occasionally.
Very, very rare.
Yeah. So you have experienced both of these seminars. What you would see as a difference in the style or in the atmosphere of this seminar? Was it what was different and what was similar?
It's a very interesting question. At some point, much later, I thought about that. The matter is that when after Anosov died, there was a book in which I participated for his memory, and with Misha Brin we wrote an article called Dmitry Viktorovich Anosov and Our Road to Partial Hyperbolicity, where we kind of looked into that. And I should say the styles were quite different. The reason there was quite a bit of in common between the two was Katok, because Katok was part of Sinai school, and he brought this part into Anosov Sinai. Anosov, if you compare Anosov and Sinai, there are two different leaders. Sinai was active, was energetic, was excited about doing this thing and that thing, etc. Anosov was much more passive. He was brilliant mathematician. You ask him question, it looks like for any question in math, regardless of the topic, he would answer almost immediately, instantaneously, which created a feeling of you deal with someone genius who knows everything in math. He was extremely thoughtful and democratic in the sense that it was very easy to interact with him. He had a maybe higher position or status in the mathematical community than Sinai in terms of formal positions, right? But you never feel it. Not that I would feel it with Sinai, of course. So in that sense, they were kind of the same. It was just very different style of doing things. But because of Katok, there was a lot of similarities. By the way, when Katok left and Stepin kind of replaced him in the seminar, it was although Stepin was also a student of Sinai, it was different.
So the seminar continued in the 80s, actually.
It did.
Mm-hmm.
But I stopped, essentially, I would say stop. I would go from time to time, but essentially stop going to this seminar after early 80s. Maybe inside 79, something like that.
Yes, I want to ask a question. If you don't want to answer, that you don't answer is, of course, like all our questions. So since we started to discuss Anosov and Sinai and their seminars, so we all know that Anosov but produced its masterpiece, his work on the structural stability. And it's difficult to mention something else of the same caliber in later time. In later time, his maybe mathematical productivity in terms of papers and other was not as spectacular, not as noticeable. What is the reason, in your opinion, of that?
First of all, Kostya, I will somewhat disagree with you. There was another fantastic work that he wrote with Katok, on what is now called Anosov-Katok method. And it has a lot of application now. It goes into rigidity theory. It's used in many ways. And according to Katok, and he wrote this in the same memoir but for Anosov, that the idea was Anosov idea. And what Katok did, as he said, I would just wrote down what Anosov was telling me to do. It's not exactly true, but there's much truth into what he said.
Yeah, I'm not questioning his
No,
insight
he-
and his strengths.
I'm saying that I mean, you can argue whether this is at the same level as structural stability. He also did, I would agree, not at the same level of ingenuity, but also a fantastic work on flows on surfaces. It started with Green as it's a Gorky school, where they worked for many years on this topic, and they wrote a big paper, brought it to Anosov. They asked to help publish in Uspekhi, and he read the entire paper and he said, no, it has to be redone. No more was more on scientific grounds than anything else. And so from that moment on, he kind of worked with them. And the pieces that came out of that was 10 times higher level than it was originally.
I can imagine.
Yes, and that was one of his last great achievements, I would say.
And then?
And then that was it.
And
I
what is the
remember
reason
this-
for that?
I'm sorry?
What is the reason for that?
It's hard to say. From one hand, he continued to be on top of the civics. He received a lot of communication with Western mathematicians. Most of the preprints that were distributed during our seminar was from Anosov, and he would, and he knew everything what was going on, and he could explain many things to people. So I would not say he stopped working. He did normally, as he would do, but I believe he kind of reached certain level of being a top mathematician in a certain area, and maybe was kind of satisfied with that. For example, I can tell you that he was my advisor, formal advisor. Not only formal, I mean, whatever I would prove, I would come to him, and he would be the first person to look into that and criticize whatever might be wrong or whatever. But he would never suggest anything. If he find a mistake and said, this is a mistake, he would never say how to correct it or at least give a hint.
So there is a story like that with the non-uniform hyperbolicity, right?
Yes.
I think I remember you telling me that he found mistakes several times, right? In your
No, what happened is that he actually, I mean, when with Misha, we wrote our joint work, and we came to Anosov asking whether we could defend our PhD based on this work. He said, if not 2 Jewish students, it wouldn't be a problem. But for 2 Jewish students, he wanted another example of anti-Semitism from a person who was absolutely not anti-Semitic. He said, each of you should write additional paper, and we discussed with Misha, and it was clear that Misha was interested in continuing the work for frame flows and this type of things. And I said, of course, Misha, you keep doing that. I mean, we agreed that we would help each other if necessary, but it would be a work of that person. And I was thinking of what to do, and Anosov gave me a book, which unfortunately exists only in Russian, on Lyapunov experiment, and said, read it, maybe you can come up with something there. And I actually studied it very, very thoroughly.
Who was that?
It's Stepanov, Nemitsky, and Vinograd.
Качественная теория.
Качественный. Нет. Теория показателей Липунова.
Well,
That's another book.
Okay.
Yes. And I read it from the first page to the last, in a sense. I could reconstruct every argument and everything else. And I did come with idea of what now is called non-uniform hyperbolicity, except that the definition was incorrect. And I came to Amosov and I told him that, yes, I have a new notion, new approach to more general hyperbolicity, etc., etc. He spent 5 minutes listening to me, and then he said, this is all wrong.
That's how it's supposed to be.
No, he said, it's wrong. That's it. That was the end of the conversation. And I was, of course, very upset because it was a stupid mistake, I should say, that I made. I should have realized it, but I didn't. So it was before the seminars, and there was a seminar, some was speaking, I was kind of sitting, and maybe my mind, without me, myself, kept working on that. But on my way home in a subway, I remember this very well, I realized how it's supposed to change it. And then it should work. So I came home and I called Amosov and I said, I know how to change it. And he said, no, this will be again wrong. I said, how do you know? I bet you it's right. He said, okay, here is my condition. Here is the deal. You come next seminar, I don't know, a few minutes earlier. I give you 5 minutes. If you're not correct, and I bet you are wrong, then you will never attend my seminar again.
You will never return to my seminar again.
Yeah, I do not allow you to attend my seminar again.
Was he serious?
I don't think so. But he said that, and you never know. No, I'm pretty sure this would never happen.
And you took the risk.
And I took the risk. And I came, and to me, it was a memorable moment because I came, I explained to him what is now the definition of non-uniform hyperbolicity. And I remember the scene that it was typical, and also when he needs to think, he put his hand behind the back, started walking from the desk to the wall, the opposite wall, and back. And people started to come to the seminar. Brin came, Katov came, and everybody was looking. No one wanted to interrupt him and ask what's going on. And I was sitting on the front row. And he was walking. It lasted for 5 minutes. I believe that it was enough for him to kind of oversee the future development of everything coming out of that. And then he came to me and he said, "You're allowed to sit at the seminar."
He has a very good sense of humor.
He did.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yasha, a very interesting story. And I didn't know many things from what you're telling. The story about your initial interaction with Anosov about this subject is fascinating. Well, at what stage did you explain it to Sinai's seminar? The notion of non-uniform hyperbolicity. Did you give a talk about it?
I gave a talk.
Which year we're talking about?
That was some end of the 70s. I cannot tell you exact date or anything. My papers were published 76, 78 during this period of time, and somewhere at this time I gave it.
And how was it accepted?
Oh, very, very, very well. I mean, Auxiliadis was there, and he greatly appreciated all of this because it was based on his work, and I clearly said that.
And Sinai as well.
And Sinai, of course, too. And Sinai, of course.
I think maybe Alexeyev was not alive anymore.
No. Alexeyev was present as well. Yes. Leonid Bunimovich was.
I remember that Lysang liked to say that when Katov came to the United States, and it was about that time.
78.
Yeah, he brought the light of Pesin theory to the West. And
yeah, that was actually true.
Yes,
because before Toля left, we kind of discussed future projects. We had in mind certain future projects, but since Toля decided that he would leave, we have to kind of see the future for both of us. Toля was very much involved, and I indebted to him for his help. I mean, I was sitting, I had my paper, I would come to his home, his apartment, and he would go through every thing I wrote and said, no, it should be this way, it should be that. Not in terms of mathematics, but in terms of how to present mostly. Since I was not experienced and he was already very well experienced, and he helped me present it in a kind of a more broad way, so it would really.
Probably realize immediately the importance of
Yeah,
this, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, going back to from mathematics to life. I mean, Tole was the first participant, well, one of the first participants ever who left for the West. And did it cross your mind that you might do the same?
Absolutely, absolutely. The problem was that my mother and my father worked in an institute which was they had a high level of security, clearance, which means that they would definitely not be allowed, and my application would most probably be denied as well. So I discussed it with them. They didn't like the idea of leaving, but if I would leave, they would leave too. I mean, the personal relations were much more important. They were just afraid to do things like that. And but it was on our mind. Then in the 80s, things turned to the worst. There was practically no way to go. The curtains were closed again, and that was it. Until after maybe 85 or 86, when Gorbachev came to power, where this question came up again. But at this time, my mother was sick, pretty much. It was clear that it was just a matter of time. She died in 1988, and in 1989 we left.
And your father left with you?
Yes, and my father left us.
I see.
So that was a personal.
So was it a difficult transition for you, for going from Soviet Union and the school of doing mathematics in Soviet Union to the West and adjusting to them?
The matter is that about 5 years before I left, I switched my job from research institute to, it was called Engineering Construction Institute, but it was educational institute. So I taught for evening students and extramural. It was extramural institute. So I taught not during the day, but mostly during evenings, or I would go to some educational centers and teach there for a few days, take exams and everything else.
It was in Petrovka?
No. Engineers.
Okay.
I don't even know how to say it in Russian. I'm sorry. So yes, and I was there about 5 years. So I did teach, which means that, and I had students, very low level students, not very much interested in mathematics, but according to the Soviet rule, educational rule at the time, you teach them like you would teach math students at Moscow University. The program was more, in a sense, the same. The level was completely different, but the program was the same, and you had to follow this program. And so I had to seriously adjust it to the level of student. So that gave me 5 years of great teaching experience, which I didn't have before. So when I came to United States, language was a barrier, especially in the beginning, but adjust was not so much.
So your first appointment was on the University of Chicago?
Yes, that was arranged by Tole. The matter is, in '88, I was able to leave the country to Paris under invitation of Joel Leibowitz. I attended the programs that he organized for a month. And there
in IGS?
At IGS, yes. And there I contacted Misha and I contacted Tole. No, I didn't talk to Tole, but I contacted Misha. And Misha said that this Tole, they will. Okay, and I said that I'd like to go. And I asked for, this invitation. Kind of a Jewish type invitation to go to Israel. And everything was arranged. And that's why we were able to leave. So when I came to Vienna, it was first stop. Misha asked Zygmunt to invite me for a talk, which I did. At that time,
Carl Zygmunt.
Carl Zygmunt, yes. And at that time, there was some other people I met, and I could talk to them. They paid me huge amount of money by my standards at the time. I don't even remember the amount, but it was so big. And then our next step, it was kind of in Vienna, you announce that you're going to go to United States, and they bring you to Italy, to Rome. And there, again, I got a call from Laura Tadeschini that they wanted to give me a position. And I was like a research visitor, something like that, at Rome. Yes, for 2 months. Which also helped us to kind of survive. In fact, not only that, but we were able to help quite a bit of our friends to survive, because it was quite a bit of money, again, by the standards of the time. And at that time, I knew that I was going to Chicago, because Katok agreed with Bob Zima. So we came to Chicago, were met by Bob and his secretary, and I spent almost 6 months teaching there. I started teaching the next day after I arrived.
And then you switched to.
And then I got three places invited me for informal discussion. I wouldn't say interview, but it was kind of informal discussion. Newhouse at Chapel Hill, then Shuni Chow at Georgia Tech, and Penn State. And every place, your discussions if I'm interested, etc., etc. So I talked to Bob Zimmer because I love Chicago University, and I still do. It's a great place, absolutely great place in any respect. The area where we stayed was not great, but we had to quickly learn the rules. But otherwise, it was a fantastic place. And I talked to Bob, and he said, unfortunately, that year we don't have absolutely no position in mass. So he said, next year we most probably will be, and we will definitely consider you. But of course, he couldn't guarantee anything. And I had a family, and soon after this discussion, I got an offer from Penn State. I spoke to Misha, who was my kind of confidant for this type of thing, and he said, you go where Katok goes.
Misha said?
Misha said.
Why so?
Because then you do math and Torah takes the rest. That was his advice. And that's how we ended up in State College.
Yes, if I go back a little bit to mathematics. So yes. After Pesin theory, you started to be more interested in the dimension theory and formalism and things related. How it happened, this transition?
It started with a paper that Anosov gave me of Anthony Menin and McCluskey on dimension of horseshoes, two-dimensional horseshoes. And he suggested me to think about that. And I did, and I came up with a notion of dimension that depends on the dynamics. And I wrote a paper, brought it to Anosov. Anosov looked into that and said, this is a nice paper, except that it does not have any application. I don't see where it goes.
It's a natural notion.
Absolutely. Well, it's natural notion, but he wanted that. He said, if you can show me a result which you can prove using this, but cannot prove or difficult to prove using another method, then I would accept it.
Fair enough.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. And I came up with an example, which was an attractor where you want to show that the sum of Lyapunov exponent is negative. And I did it using dimension. That was trivial application of that. And Anosov agreed, and paper was published. But I wasn't satisfied with the result. So then I met Pitsky, and we discussed various things, in particular, if you consider full shift onto symbols, and you remove all the generic BV generic points, what's left? And we found that easy proof, not the one which now kind of popular, but another one to do that. And we got fascinated, and slowly it moved us to thermodynamics, pressure, and stuff like that. But then Pitsky started to do something else, and I continued, and I invented this carousel business. That's and I wrote big paper. I brought it to an author because he was the one who would take care of publications in a sense. He looked through that, he said, fantastic things. Pure Anosov thing, he said, Yasha, I exhausted this era Jewish publications, so you have to find someone else. And I said, who else could it be? And he said, Arnold.
Functional analysis.
No, it was speaking. And I came to Arnold. He said, give me the paper. I did. A week later or whatever, I came to him and he said, Yasha, you are such a good mathematician, but what this paper is not at your level.
Arnold said.
That Arnold said. And I was very disappointed, and I put paper under the table. That was it. I decided I'm not going to publish. And then sometime later, I met Anosov, and he said, where is your paper? What happened? And I explained the story. He said, don't even listen to him. It's a wonderful paper. But Arnold gave me positive report on the paper, but said this. He gave me positive report, but said this. I decided not to publish. Then Anosov said, no, you publish. And that's how it was published.
Yasha, so obviously when you were in Soviet Union, you didn't have PhD students or graduate students.
No.
But when you moved to the States, you started to supervise PhD students. Who was your first student?
Mia Hua. He actually spoke yesterday. Yeah. Yes. We did a wonderful work with him, which was nothing in dimension. It was lattice models. It started with C9, attracting me to this problem.
Actually, I wanted to ask why you didn't expand from a couple of lattices type of thing, which you did with C9.
No, I did.
That's
the matter is that we wrote a paper with C9 pretty soon before I left.
Yes, I remember that.
And I mean, it was ready. I had no idea where it was going to publish, etc., etc. So we left, and I kind of forgot about that because there was little communication. And when I came, and Mia Ho came to me to be a student, I told him this is a problem. We did only one part. With CNI, we did only one part. We constructed conditional measures, but there was no SRB as a measure. And so we started thinking to continue what I did with CNI, and then we came up with a completely different idea. And that's how it was actually solved. And that was his PhD and our job.
How many PhD students altogether you had?
I have one at the moment who's a 15th. 15th.
Yeah. All right. So let me ask you the following: so 60s and 70s and 80s were an exciting period for theory of dynamical systems. 60s definitely, 70s still, and 80s were kind of continuation of that.
Yeah.
Do you think this is as exciting period now, or there's?
I believe so. The matter is that in the 60s and 70s, you had thermodynamic formalism for essentially uniformly hyperbolic systems. What we're trying to do now is to build it for non-uniform hyperbolic system. And here, I'm particularly excited because this carousel business, which was a dimension theory, in a way, to the rescue, I should say.
In a way, you
Provided
kind of
we may.
combine both things together.
Yes, exactly. And to me, it's very exciting. And I'm working with Von and Agnieszka on that, but other people are involved in doing the same thing.
I have no doubt, but in general, about the subject in general, is it, you think it evolves in a kind of predictable way? What are the main problems?
When you build on giants, it's always difficult to claim that this is the next giant. But I believe it is an area which would flourish for the next 5 at least, but maybe 10 years.
So apart from this area of thermodynamic formalism for non-uniformly hyperbolic systems, what would you consider the most interesting open problems? You're not interested working on them?
I am.
No, I'm asking whether something else.
I can tell you in my 77 paper on Uspehi, I posed two open problems in dynamics. One is when you have a diffeomorphism with non-zero Lyapunov exponent, everything is volume preserving, smooth measure preserving, doesn't matter. And you want to show that typical inner sense perturbation has non-zero exponent on the positive measure set. And the second kind of a sister problem is when you have whatever diffeomorphism, and you want to show that you can perturb it to obtain a diffeomorphism with non-zero Lyapunov exponent on a set of positive measures. There's little progress in this direction. There's quite a bit of known in the C1 topology. Yeah, I should say that topology is C1 plus epsilon. In C1, there's huge progress, starting with Manet. C1 plus alpha, very, very little known. And it's an extremely important problem. It has its counterpart in Hamiltonian dynamics is to prove that a side of the invariant counter tori, which form a set of positive measure. Everything else is a chaotic C, which is an aquatic component with non-zero mathematics. The best result in this direction that I know of is the recent result of Boraga, Ivanov, and Boraga's student, Dovchan, the positivity of entropy on the remaining part, which is a wonderful result, but it's very far from what I'm saying. And I'd like to say that if you solve this problem, then Arnold diffusion is completely solved. So that's what I would consider. But I don't know how, I have no idea how to approach that, and etc. But slowly I see new techniques coming out every single year that I believe goes somehow into this direction.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it was a period of slowdown, I think, in dynamics when it was, but now I think it's more exciting period that there are kind of new avenue opening.
It always is the case. And dynamics now is much broader field than it was. So besides hyperbolic dynamics, which is what we mostly talked about, you have Teichmüller, you have rigidity, and hyperbolic dynamics enters each of them with their own problems, which is another excited thing. And then you talk Schrödinger equation, Schrödinger cycle. And again, you see hyperbolic dynamics is a big part of that. So that's where things will go. But there will be problem within the hyperbolic C, which for the next 10 years will occupy it completely.
Andrey, any other question you want to ask?
I'm not sure if you want to say something maybe about your interactions with Gorky School, like you wrote several papers with
Green, you mentioned.
Yes, I wrote with Abramovich.
No, yeah.
Yes, I have he's a great man, a great mathematician.
Good friend also.
Yeah, a very good friend of mine. And we had a tradition since we didn't have interactions when we both were in Soviet, and we knew each other, but we didn't.
I thought papers are treated. Isn't the papers from the ages? No.
No, the papers were read. Maybe there was one. Maybe there was one paper that we were
supposed to work with Shilnikov and.
We might have one paper, joint paper in the Soviet Union, during the time of the Soviet Union, but most of our paper came after he visited me many times
Here?
yes, in State College, and we had a tradition every time that he comes, the paper comes out. But it was great to work with him, I would say.
But this Green School, you're not.
I know never been involved in. I mean, I discussed with Greeners in particular several problems, but I never been involved into. So my PhD was there, and I am indebted to these people because they helped me tremendously in everything, the step on the way to do this, and we became very close friends. Of course.
There's still very active school in this direction.
Yes.
Green is Pachinka and people around them.
Yeah, Zhizhoma.
Sure.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's that is absolutely true. And they used to come to Moscow, and some of them will stay, like Aranson would stay in our apartment, because whereas they have to stay somewhere, you can go to hotels or whatever. So we would have some of them. Green stayed with us for some time. So, yeah, we were very close friends.
Yes, I think we were talking for a long time, but maybe you can tell us some interesting story which we didn't touch and which we didn't ask question in the direction. Maybe there's something you can.
Oh,
there are so many of them.
so many of them, yes. Maybe I tell you some kind of a funny story.
Yes.
Happened in Penn State. The matter is that when I arrived, and I mentioned to you that I had to start teaching at Chicago University right virtually next day, the course was on dynamical systems.
Graduate course.
Graduate course, yes. And I was very excited about that.
Do you remember anyone from that course who is?
That's what I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
That's exactly what I was going to tell you. No, I was very much concerned about my English because I certainly was able to communicate and teach. But one thing is to do it in Russia in English. Another thing when you come to real world and start giving a course, I was really. I was afraid that I may fail in that respect. But it went well, I should say. And then many years later, I was in State College. I got a call from chairman of the physics department. And he said, we have a colloquium speaker, and the guy very much wants you to come. And I said, I'm not physicist.
Here in Penn State.
In Penn State, yes. He called my home. I was at home when he called. And I said, who is the guy? And he said, you don't probably know his name. Why would he want me to meet with me? Like, come on. And he said, no, he said he knows you. He wants to talk to you. I said, okay, I will come. But unfortunately, the time of the colloquium is the time of my lecture. So I can't do that, but I can come before the colloquium, as they have usually tea, all of these things. So I came. The chairman, whom I knew, came with some guy. The guy came to me and said, this is my name. You probably don't remember me. I said, I'm sorry, I don't. He said, I was a student in your Chicago class. And it was very important for me because that's the first time I learned dynamical systems. And I now work in the applications of dynamical systems in physics, thanks to you. And I asked him, could you please tell me, were you able to understand what I was telling you? He said, no problem. And that was kind of an interesting, funny story.
It's interesting that if you go, say, to Moscow, another Russian-speaking country, and will start to try to teach math in Russian, now you probably will have problem teaching it in Russian.
To a certain extent, yes.
Yes, when I'm writing papers, sometimes I'm writing hierarchical papers in Russian, I have difficulty actually writing them in Russian.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
I would probably have some problems.
You can overcome it, but at the beginning you feel awkward and
Yes.
kind of.
Yes.
Well, Yasha, thank you very much for the time and for very interesting discussion. And I think
Yes,
it will
thank you.
be interesting for some people, not only for us. For me, I learned many interesting things which I didn't know.
Yeah.
And that's explained that you always can learn new things, even when you think that you know everything.
Well, it's life. You cannot
Yeah,
tell the entire life. It will take as much time.